They're right. I wanted to say, come on in, folks. Come and join in. We have seats right here. Yeah. Do you have reservations? Do you have reservations? Can I put this right in front of you? But don't touch it. I know it looks good.
Well, that's just cruel.
I'll pay you rent, maybe a brownie. Come on in, everyone. Do we have everybody in here? Hello. So I want to say, first of all, I want to thank Carol Rowan. Is Carol here? Where's Carol? Okay, we're going to thank Carol Rowan. Big Carol. She's out there somewhere. Big Carol. The pieces you see to my right and left were brought here today by Carol Rowan. Carol has been an artist since 1983, and she and her partner live here in D.C. She wanted to highlight some of the great local LGBT artists, so thank you. Carol, I like the bighorn sheep, if that's what it is, or the whatever that is. It makes me feel warmer. Anyway, thank you all. Thank you, Carol, for doing it. So let me tell you what we're going to do. We are going to have a conversation on the broad new big discussion on transgender civil rights. And we're going to try and do something a little weird, fun. You're all just so formal. Here, you want a sandwich? Go ahead. Yeah, you're a vegetarian? Have a brownie. There you go. Sandy, that's great. Elle, what would you like? You're okay? Yeah, we've got little plates and stuff.
I'll take just a napkin.
You're right. Aditi, you look hungry.
I'm okay right
You
now.
need to eat.
Yeah. All right.
There you go. Hi, you've been working hard today.
Yeah, and I'm not.
All right.
Too.
Gabe, lumberjack man, here you go.
I'll have a cookie.
Yeah. Allison, you're good? No? Yeah? Okay, there you go. And give this lady a plate here. Here we go. Yeah, plate right here. Oh, do you want one, right? Yeah. Okay, yes.
I would like some water.
Some water, okay. Margaret, that's your department. Okay, well, anyway, we're going to have this. This is what we call cafe style. I don't know how many of you were there, but a couple of years ago at the White House Correspondents Association weekend, the Atlantic and National Journal did an editorial. You're nodding. Remember that crazy day? I showed up in shorts, a kind of Japanese hakama, stained shirt, and really bad sandals. I was the most failed gay man in D.C. in my fashion that day. And we had a great conversation. We had 18 speakers, and we mixed them with the audience. So you're in the cafe, and I see my friend, where's Andrew Bolden? Andrew's got to be the most distinctive. Andrew is a good, do you have a line for us, Andrew?
Steve Clemens, who doesn't know?
See, he's just part of the... I haven't seen him in 10 years, but whenever I walked in, he would do that. Anyway, thank you all. So let me tell you who we have here with us. Sandy James is the survey project manager at the National Center for Transgender Equality. I have permission to refer to him as the data diva for today's discussion. So great to have you with. We have Darcy Chemnitz, is executive director of the LGBT Bar Association. And we have Elle Hearns. Yeah, lawyers, yeah. And we have Elle Hearns, the Central Region Field Coordinator for Get Equal, partner with Black Lives Matter, does all sorts of cool stuff. And we have Aditi Hardikar, Associate Director of Public Engagement at the White House, which has gotten very involved in the large transgender question, and I'm sure it's because of you, right? Yeah, you're doing all that work. She was trying to say the president is responsible for everything, and I just don't buy it. We have with us Monica Hopkins Maxwell, Executive Director of the Capital Area ACLU. And as we've seen already on stage, Kai Feldblum, Commissioner of the EEOC. Really amazing work. As I understand it from Senator Tammy Baldwin, you helped write the Americans for Disability Act. And so I just want to kind of punctuate that you've been in this game for a long time. Or maybe a short time, but very effectively. So... And then we have Allison Dillon Robinson, lead consultant for diversity and inclusion at Cook Ross, a very good friend of mine who actually participated in the Correspondents Association breakfast, was one of our 18 awesome cafe members. Remember how hard it was to get the guys to eat any carbs? It was embarrassing. You know, it was a complicated thing. But Allison, as many of you know, was also the first trans executive director of OutServe SLDN, and I really admired her work. And then we have Gabe Silverman, who is a director of a forthcoming feature film called Transmilitary. A journalist previously with Washington Post, and now working as well with the New York Times, as I understand it, right? Sort of right? Yeah. You were commissioned by the New York Times. That's sort of true, the same thing as working with, right? Yeah, I'm actually technically right. In any case, it's great to have you all here. And then this must be the great Kyler Broadus, founder of the Trans People of... Nice to meet you. I'm Steve Clements. How are you? Would you like a sandwich? Where are the sandwiches? You know, like a brownie? Yeah. Where did my sandwiches go? Okay, we needed... Yeah, you took them away? Yeah, Kyler, kind of give him a cookie as well. So, Kyler, thank you so much. So, big thing is, Kyler, just being... Let me ask you first, you know, in this notion of thinking about unfinished business, and the reason that we want to have discussion with all of you today, particularly with somewhat of a focus on trans issues, is I'd like to, you know, start with Elle and just say how, with people like myself, how, and everyone in the room, how should we frame the issues that matter in the trans community? Because it is a community that's just becoming, that we're becoming more acquainted with now for many, many folks. And maybe it should have happened a long time ago, but it hasn't. And so the question is, when you think about the equities that you carry into this discussion and what we should be aware of, how do you frame it? What's your the most important from Get Equal?
Yeah, this is a for me. So clarify that. I think the most important thing is for...
Oh, when you have a little microphone here, you can
shut up.
add a little sizzle.
Hey.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I think the most important thing is really allowing, and not even allowing, but, well, actually allowing yourself to understand that you are not an expert. Mm-hmm. That trans people are the experts, and there's no one that can report or share or tell their experience like a trans person can. So even with this field of folks here, everyone's not trans. And so really, you know, understanding that trans people should be leading their own causes, should be telling their own stories. And I think like that's the broader, bigger picture for myself and from the movements that I represent.
Do you feel like the chance to tell your own story is amping up finally? Or is that always been there and now more people are listening?
I think that trans people have always lived in their truths. I think the sensationalism around the world is now starting to catch up to the truth that we've always lived. So I think we have seen a lot of visibility, and I think we've seen a lot of visibility. Hey, Ruby. Yes, God.
Wow.
We've seen that visibility.
You want a brownie? Here,
I think she's okay.
Some sandwiches? Go ahead.
Yeah, I think we've seen that visibility increased, obviously, because of mainstream media and the folks who are literally on the ground, in the streets, rising up against what society says is right, what society says is norm. So I think that's the space that
But I think we should look
exists.
at this from a historical kind of a perspective, because think about what you know about the transgender experience or transgender people, right? Go back in time. Christine Jorgensen? How many people know that name? Right? What year did Christine Jorgensen... I don't need a microphone.
Yeah.
I'm a lawyer. What year?
Oh, yeah, they do. This is going to millions of people watching online.
Sorry. 1956, Christine Jorgensen wrote her book, and it was called, what? Well, when did she transition? Okay,
yeah.
52?
Right.
And it was from GI to Blonde Bombshell, right? Where some of the articles written about her. Yeah. This is World War II. This isn't 1968 Summer of Love. This is the 1970s, you know, the rise of the Mr. Mom and all this. This is the 1950s. So this idea that, oh, this is also new, I think we have to educate ourselves of what our own history is on this.
Yeah.
Great point, great point. Allison, yeah, go
Steve,
ahead.
I want to jump in and first thank Elle for making the point that you just made, right? And because we're friends, and because I maybe have less at stake here, I'll put a bit of a finer point on it. So, you know, we have a panel on emerging trans issues here,
right.
Less of half of which is made up of transgender people. I need you to try harder. I need you to do better. And honestly, you know, I'll add, you know, the others who are on the platform here are incredible allies. And I'm kind of over the word ally to begin with, because it just doesn't mean much in our culture anymore. These are people who are acting in solidarity every day with transgender people. Not everybody who calls themselves an ally can say that. That said, this is going to continue to happen as long as allies continue to say yes to step into these spaces. Because when you do, you occupy a space that a transgender people could be standing in to share their story. So
I totally agree with you.
And I think
We'll keep working hard at it.
I think that's really important that you said that also, because I think that something that I'm always perplexed by anytime I'm in a space is, one, I'm always, where are the Black trans women? How many are in this room? That's right, okay. And then also, like,
I'll make a deal with you.
I don't want
You
to
help
deal.
me. You don't want a deal?
No, because I'm not done. So, also, where are the Black people at in the room?
The who?
So I think when we talk about like people speaking to their own experiences, really understanding that like part of being an ally, so to say, or acting as an ally is to, one, recognize like the privilege in which you carry. So when you're interacting with someone, it's really important to understand that like your privilege and the privilege of trans people, especially trans people of color, it looks a lot different. And also like how you are in, I don't want to say solidarity. I'm trying to, in 2016, I'm trying to introduce some new language. Because I realize what happens is the influence of trans people has been so great. Allies have adopted language, have adopted behavior as if it's your own. And it's like, no, this language was gifted to you. You were given this. This was not something that you created on your own. You're not that special.
Yeah. My deal is let's trade lists next year. So when we do this next year, I'm happy to work with new networks, and I take that very fairly, because I got to tell you, I don't know if there are any other lunches between 12:30 and 1:15 that are like this, but we're making progress. So is that fair? That's fair. Kai? Yeah. Okay.
So actually, I love that we're starting the conversation with this, because I hope we can not just stay at this one level, which I think we've often heard this, but like taking it down a few more levels, right? And making it clear the complexity that's going on here, right? So I think Barney Frank it was Barney, but it was Tammy Baldwin who said, we have to change hearts, minds, and laws. Okay, so if you had, for example, a full group of trans folks, you would be doing, I think, a lot in terms of hearts and minds, in terms of a whole type of different experiences. But if you had half that were doing that, and the other half that were working, whether as I'm working in law, or you're working in media, or you're working, in a community, if you're working in the White House, of course you want those other people, because you not only want those other people to be doing the work, as you said, but also communicating that. So this to me is absolutely a joint responsibility, right? So I'm a Jew, I'm a lesbian, I'm a woman. So those are all things that I'm a former Orthodox Jew. I mean, these are things that form my identity, and no one else can speak for me on that. Child of a Holocaust survivor, no one else can speak for me. But I don't want, if I'm trying to change a law, that it's only my community that's working it, whatever name we give it.
Cool angle. Kyler.
Well, glad to be here. Thanks for having me. I've been in the LG movement and then the trans movement for a long time. And I just remember always saying, let's, at least in the trans movement, work towards diverseness. And that just seemed to never be heard. I'll just be quite frank about that. I banged the drum about that in spaces that I was in for a long time. And we just seemed to replicate the mistakes, and I'll call them mistakes, of the larger LGB movement by excluding trans people of color, which is why I waited a long time for younger people to create something called something called Trans People of Color. Then I did. Then a bunch of groups came out after, and I'm glad they did, because I really wasn't trying to create anything, because I had just been in too many spaces as the only person of color in those spaces. And I felt it was my obligation when I stepped in those spaces that I wasn't in those spaces for me. I was in those spaces for all people of color. And, you know, some people may have misconstrued that, but that's how I felt, because I come from a place of one step away from slavery that we continue to forget in this country. I was a whoops, there it is, of parents that were extremely old, and they were slaves in this country, and we forget that. The act may have been abolished, but as we know, a law may be implemented, but however, enacted, but the implementation of it takes forever, and how we act it out in society takes forever. So I never take anything to heart. We have a long struggle ahead of us. And trans people need to be leading the trans movement, and trans people are not leading the trans movement. And I see that as extremely problematic, and it's caused lots of problems and lots of isms within the trans movement that need to be hashed out, because I've never seen such a divisiveness within the trans movement, and I'll speak to that, because we should be in unity, because we're all rowing in the same boat for the same problem. So the divisiveness is really problematic.
As somebody who wasn't aware of the divisiveness, can you share a little bit about what's driving it? Why is it? And as more attention comes in, does that create incentives for more fracturing, or does that create opportunities for actually saying, okay, now we have an opportunity to come together?
Well, I think now we have an opportunity to come together, because I think what happens is when we're not leading our own movement, as other people get fractions of that divisiveness and amplify it, and that makes it worse, because they don't know what's really going on in the movement. And if they would let trans people lead the movement, that wouldn't be going on, because we could then do our own business and that would be taken care of. But however, it gets amplified because other people are leading our movement, and that's problematic. And I've never been one to hold my tongue. I speak the truth because that's the way I was raised, and Midwesterners are just like that.
Oh, I'm like that. I like it. Monica?
Midwesterners just tell you like it is, and that's why I'm probably most hated, and I don't mind being hated for that.
Not by me.
Good.
I like that's
well,
great.
Good, brother. So,
Monica?
Anyway.
So I'm incredibly glad that Elle started with centering the movement on those most affected, and those are the folks who should be leading the movement. And I actually had that reaction when I got the email, will you want to be on this panel? I was like, well, maybe, is there someone better? I want to kind of, something I struggle with as an organization that doesn't do the beautiful direct services like Ruby does on the ground and struggles with it every day, with the ACLU. And, and we do deal with the law. We do deal with policies. This morning, I just came from the DC Council hearing on transgender death certificates. So identifying people by their actual gender identity on their death certificates. And so in a lot of spaces, our organization speaks on behalf of people. And what I struggle with is I was the director of the ACLU in Idaho, the second reddest state in the nation. And when you're doing transgender work in spaces like that, what we hear from people when we want to...
How many from Idaho? Okay, you're all alone.
It's a beautiful secret. But in spaces like that, how do we develop a movement that is centered on trans individuals, but also what you hear in a lot of rural spaces is to center and have led a movement by trans individuals means putting themselves in harm's way, and in danger in their rural communities, in communities where it's unsafe. But additionally, on the unsafe, a lot of folks who are trans in different places actually say, look, I just want to transition, and I don't want people to know that I've transitioned. And that's kind of the struggle and how to be a good solidarity organization where we respect. We've got to center this movement. We also have to respect people who say, please do the work so my rights are protected, but I'm not going to be leading.
So I actually want
Yeah, Sandy, real quick.
to weigh in on some of that a little bit. Yeah, we have a wide spectrum of trans people and how they identify and how out they want to be, and that's all great. But I want to talk a little bit about visibility. So this is a piece of visibility. We've gotten some visibility here. This is great.
Right.
But what is this going to translate into? And that is the piece that's really missing. We're getting a lot of visibility way back to the Christine Jorgensen times. That was visibility, but was that visibility that was beneficial to trans people? Did it actually benefit the daily lives of trans people? Right now we have tons of visibility. I think my mother might even know who Laverne Cox is, but it doesn't mean that her very conservative Christian ideals are moved by just knowing that we have an amazing black trans woman doing the work, I will say.
I just want to push back a little bit because I think with levels of visibility doing the work looks very different. And so we have to start actually redefining who's doing what work. Because visibility as an actress and there's levels.
You're totally right about that. So what I was trying to say is you're actually getting to my point exactly. The fact that people who I know who are very conservative know this one person doesn't mean they know anything about what trans experiences are like on a day-to-day basis. They have a slice. They get to see certain people who have gotten to, they've gotten certain platforms. But that's not what the day-to-day is. That's not who's down at Casa Ruby.
So take us down for, because this is a slice, and I'm going to, in a friendly way, push back against Elle on and Allison on the notion that the panel, the panel should be, because this is a cafe, and life is a cafe, and there are people who come from different backgrounds and different places, and it's in that collage of people and perspective and politics and backgrounds where this truth needs to be, in my view, negotiated. So, cafe. But I like the idea of more, which you can help me on. But Sandy, I want to ask you before I go, tell me about the data and tell me what you're working on with research, because research and data are things that create opportunities for communication and understanding that sometimes human stories don't quite get at sometimes. So tell me what you're doing.
Yeah, so part of what the data is important for is supplementing the anecdotal evidence. So we all know what things are like on a day-to-day basis for trans people, but a lot of times the people who are making policy, making law, and doing all those things and actually doing things that can change lives on a day-to-day basis aren't willing to listen because they don't have the numbers. They don't think that this is a real thing. They need support before they can go forth and take something to the legislature. I need to know how many people in my county this affects, or how many people in my state. So we have to collect data on this information.
Right.
So starting back in 2008, 2009, National Center for Transgender Equality and the task force, the National LGBTQ Task Force, partnered together to do a survey. They released a report, Injustice at Every Turn. It was the largest survey done to date. And that's probably, if you hear any numbers on trans discrimination, it came from that survey. But there's more. So the survey I'm currently working on is the data was collected in 2015. We just collected it, and we're crunching the numbers. People showed up in massive amounts for that survey. I can't tell you how many because we haven't released those results yet. But there are other efforts going on. So just here in DC, the DC Needs Assessment data was just released, so we can see what's going on in DC. The Office of Human Rights in DC recently did a study, which is I think the first governmental-led study that looked at trans discrimination in employment. We need more of this. We need governments to be supporting this. We need states and federal collection of data to be happening. We need support to collect this data so that we can move policy forward.
Thank you. Elle, real quick, and then
So
Gabe.
I think three things, and hopefully I remember all of the three things, but The first thing around like trans visibility, I'll go there, resources. So when we're talking about being truly in solidarity looks like moving resources so that trans people actually have access to lead the causes. So you can't expect to do good work or intentional work if you don't got no trans people on staff. So if there are no trans women at the ACLU that actually are employed there, of course their results, their experience is going to be visceral. Of course they're going to live in fear because they have no means to get outside of the community that they live in that's already impacting their lives. In regards to division, the reason why there is division in movements and division in whatever you want to say is because there is an analysis that is deeply lacking. And so when you have folks who have yet to be politicized in regards to white supremacy, patriarchy, misogyny, trans misogyny, anti-blackness, you always are going to have division because, to be very frank, I refuse to work with anyone that is suffering from any of those symptoms of what I like to say career constipation.
Thank you.
Back to data.
Right.
I think that it's really important to understand that data is not the only thing that will assist or support the lives of trans people. And also in your cafe world does not exist for trans people because trans people are dying. And so in the reality of all of our lives, you can't exist in that world when people are dying. And if we escape or erase the fact that people are losing their lives, then you've done a disservice to your own humanity.
I appreciate that. In the cafe today, we're going to do it. Gabe, tell us.
Okay, so I'm a cisgendered white male, and to Elle's point, I completely agree. At the same time, there was a cafe, and coming from the world of journalism, my background is not activism, it's not transgender issues, it was journalism. And so coming to this as a cisgendered white male, I've had to learn a lot. And I think that once you start to learn, you also see that the media portrayal is a major issue, and that's something we have to really work on. Because if every single video that has to do with transgender women or transgender men starts with a sappy song, either a trans woman putting on makeup or a trans man working out, even if it's the best intention, we set the movement back. And it has to be more nuanced than that. So, I humbly submit myself to the panel here for expertise, but it's something that we have to then begin to educate the media on, because quite frankly, every day, there's gonna be people who are pushed into this because it's the news of the day or because it's the cycle, that they're gonna have to cover this issue, and they've never done it before. So it's really, I think, incumbent upon the activists here to work with them on that level and explain the language, because I'm working with our co-director, Fiona Dawson, has been working in this space for quite some time now, and we pretend that I've got this invisible dog collar, because sometimes I'll stray with language, or I'll stray with notions that I'm learning. It's a process, and I think this needs to be a process for everybody, or else we're not going to get past the bathroom issue, or we're going to get past these superficial issues that hold the movement back in a significant way.
Triffy, we're right near the end panel, so Didi, you get the last word.
I wanted to quickly uplift what Elle was saying about visibility. I come from the White House and the sort of federal government perspective, and President Obama was the first president to even say the word transgender, which I think helped to affirm the dignity and the humanity of trans people. And I think sort of the work that he's been doing, and the administration and really amazing people like Hai, who've been in government and public service, have really helped to move this along. And I think just, thinking about the sort of thread of affirming humanity and dignity, I think as more trans people and genderqueer people feel like they're welcome to work within the government, that helps enormously to change policy. So you have people who are transitioning on the job, and that forces agencies, it forces the federal government and the White House to address things like, okay, well, how do we change, the names on your security form and your security card to get into the White House? And I think the sort of, I hate the word trickle down, so I'll try to figure out a word that is not trickle down. But I think, having the federal government, which is a model employer and ends up developing model policies, I think having visible people who are serving the government helps to change the way people think about their own employees and their own trans people.
Okay, they're going to come my head up, but really last word.
One of the largest employers of transgender people, if you will use the word employers, although this is the kind of job where you show up late, you go to the pokey, you end up in the brig, right? You show up late for the armed services. We have 138,000 transgender veterans who need name change documents. I want to know who the lawyers are who are going to represent 138,000 transgender veterans, right? And we need more clinics, and we need clinics and clinics
Great.
and more clinics throughout the United States to help those individuals. Because how can you get a job if you're not able to present your true self at work? So it's absolutely pivotal for those of you to understand, too, from an LGB perspective, if you're expecting people who have transitioned to come out in the same way that we as LGBs, especially those of us who are gender conforming, why would I have to tell everybody my medical history? What is the coming out experience that you just think as an LGB should it be applied to the T experience? And I think we need to challenge ourselves on that.
And I think that trans people have already affirmed our lives. You just need to follow suit.
Thank you, Elle. Thank you, everyone. Let's thank Kyler Broaddus, Kai Fledboom, Aditi Hardikar, Elle Hearns, Monica Hopkins Maxwell, Sandy James, Darcy Chemnitz, Allison Dillon, Robinson, Gabe Silverman. A big round of applause. Thank you for joining my cafe today.